morning. You can tell a lot about a society by the plays that they produce and their culture in general. Well, most of the plays that I've seen, I've had a really positive review. I saw Eisenhower right before July 4th. This hallowed ground. He has a farm in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and this is 1952. And I thought the message was phenomenal. He was the startup of NATO. He felt that the way to deter war and Russian aggression was to have a strong NATO so that nobody would interfere with European affairs. He instituted the GI Bill of Rights, knowing that the boys coming home from World War II would want to make a decision about their lives and decide if they wanted to become engineers or lawyers or whatever. Education was open to everyone. He put in the interstate highway system, connecting coast to coast. Sure, a lot of us are angry with Robert Moses for being the figure that he was and creating segregated areas of the country and of cities. However, it's been 70 years. Nothing says we can't change the configuration of those roads. Nothing says we can't add railroads and make transportation more efficient, more carbon neutral than we had before. He wasn't a party person. As a member of West Point and of the military command and the chief of all Allied forces in Europe during World War II, he liberated concentration camps, and he made everyone look at those camps so that people would remember there was a Holocaust, and it would be difficult to deny it. And why did Eisenhower choose the GOP? He chose it because of Harry Truman. Harry Truman thought that MacArthur was going to run for the presidency, and neither Ike or Truman wanted MacArthur as a president. They didn't want that authoritarian style of government. So Truman said, you gotta run, and you gotta run as a Republican against MacArthur. That's why Ike became a Republican. Otherwise, as a member of the military, he was nonpartisan. He took the oath of office very seriously because when you are in the armed forces, you pledge allegiance to the Constitution of the United States, and that Constitution was very important to him. Did he care about the deficit? You bet. But you got to remember what his upbringing was. His upbringing was a poor family farm boy, someone who couldn't even afford to go to college. That's why he went into the military. His father and mother owned a grocery store, and they lost a lot of money during the Depression, and so they were bankrupt. And his family moved from place to place so his parents could make a living. It was a hard life, and he believed in justice, equal justice for everyone. Not for the top, not for the bottom, but everyone. And he did indeed raise taxes so that everyone would pay their fair share into the federal government so that he could have the programs for Social Security and Medicare and whatever else was available at the time, because he knew that giving services to everyone was important. He didn't want anyone to tamper with people's health, their voting rights, or their right to an education. So Ike was pretty decent. And I know that I used to think 30 years ago, well, Ike was a do-nothing president. But he was far from that. He was a man with integrity and a man with a purpose and a love of facts and the truth. So Ike has gone up in everyone's mind about his position in history. Fast forward to another play I saw this week. It won a Tony. I am angry, so angry that it won a Tony. It's called Kimberly Akimbo. Well, it is a play that talks about me and only me first. Talks about committing mail and check fraud if it's for, quote unquote, a good purpose. Talks about corrupting young people to do an older person's bidding, somebody who's already committed a felony, and now gets young kids who are interested in being in a school play and her niece who is going to perhaps die from a disease that ages her. And the niece wants to take a road trip. So rather than the whole family and everyone else working harder so the niece can take the road trip, they steal a mailbox and they take checks that were directed to other people in their small town in New Jersey, Metuchen. And I was in Metuchen many years ago because Ford had an assembly plant there. And it's a lot of working people. And they show you how they commit fraud and take money from other people, cash the checks, so this young woman, Kimberly Akimbo, can go on a road trip. I think that is the wrong message. I gotta tell you, it hit me personally as well. I had a disease as a young person. Luckily, I didn't know I was supposed to die at 16. My disease was called dermatomyositis. It was an autoimmune disease. This young lady had one too. Nobody spoke about the disease in my family. Nobody wanted to speak about it. Find out how I felt. No, nobody talked about how did you feel in those days. Luckily for me, the disease burnt out. Did it leave an impression on me? You bet. Because I was on steroids for almost 15 years. And the other thing that bothered me is I didn't look for anything else other than the love of my family and getting better. So we didn't steal. My parents didn't rob. When they were told they had to pay $200 for a consultation with a famous physician, they paid the money. And steroids in those days were like $1 a tablet. They paid the money. They worked hard. They did not steal. Years later, this same scheme that they're talking about happened to me when I was in business. One of my corporations that I worked for sent a corporate check to me, not personally to my corporation, for work that had been performed. It was about $18,000. I looked for the check after the first month. It didn't come. Called the company. They swore they sent the check. They were going to send it again. Never came. I went to the post office. I had a copy of the check. I showed them the check. And they were able to find out where it was being cashed. They put out a bulletin all over the country, and sure enough, somebody had taken my corporate name off of the check, put their own personal name on it, and presented it to a Florida bank. And when they did that, they were picked up for fraud, attempted postal fraud, and check fraud. I got my check, but it took me 3 months. Now imagine if you're a poor person or a working person and somebody takes your check. I don't know what recourse they have, but I think that's a bad message to glorify. Well, we've talked about plays and plays and their reflection on our society. Eisenhower on the one hand, Kimberly Akimbo on the other. Got a Tony Award. I'm not sure why. I would have walked out if I had known the friend that I went with a little better. I would have suggested it at intermission. But I'm telling you what I think, and I hope you'll avoid the play as well. So, where is our society? And what choices do we want? Do we want to be like the old days with Eisenhower, where your word mattered, where you had integrity? I still think some of my ideas are pretty good. The economy is okay, and we're going to survive a recession. We're going to have what they call a soft landing. In New York City, our commercial vacancy rates are at 17%. It's not a disaster. We can convert a lot of commercial space for affordable housing. It's crying out. The need is there. And the need is there to put the homeless in stabilized rental units and take care of the folks who have mental health problems. We can be a much better, leaner city if we do that. Certainly, I object to more jails as a way of making revenue, and casinos, which have proven to just create a miserable environment for the employees and the surrounding area. We've paid a lot of money and given a lot of time to clean up Times Square. It would be a crime to ruin it with casinos. There's a lot that can be done in New York City. We need innovation. We need a way to lead the country on climate. We've lost so much of our barrier islands. We're planting oysters, but we can be planting swamp grasses as well. We've only got 15,000 acres left out of 350,000. We need barrier islands. So we got a lot to do in New York City. We don't need jails, and we don't need casinos. Thank you for listening. I'd like to see our culture embrace the values of Ike. I like him, and I guess a lot of everyone else does too, because he's gone from 22 out of 31 presidents to number 5. He's somebody worth understanding. Take care and have a lovely day.